Norms of Human Acts.
First, let's talk about what is norms.
Norms. Norms means accepted standards of behavior of social groups, usually written, means that norms are expectation of proper behavior, not the requirement of that behavior. Norms are not published, may not be obeyed, and cannot be enforced except by sanction of a group who use penalties as disapproval or exclusion. So in another term, a norm calls for right action and implies a generalizable reason for the rightness of the indicated conduct. Example. Fosters trust in the marketing system means act fairly and truthfully in all marketing practices such as pricing, communication, etc. I'll give you a situation like this. Marketing for a company Jensen's product is a truthful and reflects the product's capabilities. So, there are three of the qualification of norms. First, the norms need to be of single standards. Means that although there are many moral actions for human beings, morality remains always as one, since every human beings have the same human nature. Lastly, is the norms need to be universal. Means that the norm is means to everybody. It's not for a particular group or class of persons. It should be applicable to all human beings.
The two types of norms are conscience and law. First, let's talk about conscience. So what is conscience? For most of us, conscience understood as a kind of inner voice which guides us in our moral life. It's summoning us to love good and avoid evil by applying objective moral norms to our particular acts. Objective moral norms means it is a standard of our particular acts in which human being can test the morality of the act and judge whether it is good or evil. And thus, conscience also commanding us to do this or do not do that. In addition, the word conscience comes from the Latin word con means with and scientia means knowledge. Therefore, conscience uses knowledge in order to make judgment. So the main function is to find out what should be done in a given situation through examining, judging, and passing a decisions on the attributes of a given situations. So, like for example, the cashier gave me an excess change, and I am doubtful if I will return the extra money. But because of my conscience, I returned the money to the cashier because I believe that it is the right thing to do. So from what I did, I had heard my inner voice, my conscience, and had acted accordingly. So the second type of norms is law. The moral law supposes the rational order established among creatures or us for our own good and to serve our final end through the use of power, wisdom, and the goodness of our Creator. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, law is an ordinance of reason for the common good. It is promulgated by the one who is in charge of the community. So, law is primarily a reasonable plan of action. It is a certain rule and measure of acts whereby a man is induced or persuaded to act or is being restrained or something he is holding back from doing that act. In our previous lesson, we already tackled about the objective and the subjective, in which ethics is our subjective and morality is our objective. We also consider or use that in conscience and law. since we already know the definition of the objective and objective. Which do you think is the objectives or the subjectives between the two? I think you're right. Yes, conscience is our subjective. It is because it is about one reflecting inwards on oneself, on how one might feel about certain things. It is not about looking out into the world or a set of rules laws or a laws that we need to follow. It is about ourself. It is about how we might feel about certain things. While law is obviously our objective because it involves the norms and the rules that prescribe for us to conduct or that is needed to follow. And now we will proceed to the classifications of law.
So now we have here a divine law. So what do you mean by a divine law? So it says there that a divine law is a laws at work within religion coming from the higher being. So it means that this divine law is a law believed to come directly from God. It is perceived as deriving from a transcendent source, such as will of God or gods, and it is a moral revelation from God, and it is God communicating within humans. And the one example of this divine law is the Ten Commandments, because this law is all about the God has in His grace and seen fit to give us, and those mysteries and those rules giving by God.
And now let's proceed to human laws. Don't you know that human laws is made by Saint Thomas Aquinas? Thomas defines human laws as particular determination of the natural law devised by human reason. We note first that human laws are further specification of the natural law and that these are made by man. These particular determinations were discovered or made more explicit by human reason. Although they were implicitly contained in the eternal law, they are now rendered explicit or posited by the use of human reason. They are given a formulation by man as he discovers them by rational process.
External laws. Laws from a higher being that directs all actions of the universe. For example, those who are not looking at the sun know the effects of its rays. Therefore, we should say that no one except the blessed who see God by essence can know the external law as it is in itself. In other words, external law is comprised of those laws that govern the nature of an eternal universe. It is the law that God in the creation of man infused into him for his directions and preservation. An unjust law is a human law that is not rooted in eternal law.
Natural law. Natural law is based on the use of reason held common to all humans. Natural law is also a theory in ethics and philosophy that says the human beings possess intrinsic values that govern their reasoning and behavior. So what is intrinsic value? Intrinsic value is a property of anything that is valuable on its own. The first example of nature's law includes the idea that is universally accepted and understood that killing a human being is wrong. However, it is also universally accepted that punishing someone for killing that person is right.
So let's talk about positive law. So what is positive law? Positive law refers to a body of man-made laws that may regulate conduct in a certain area. This type of law may be traced back in ancient times and is typically passed by government at the local, regional, or national level. It is sometimes contrasted with natural law, which is typically based on moral principles. These types of laws might set the standards for acts that are required as well as those that prohibited. The term positive may has been used to describe positive laws because they are typically imposed on the citizens of a particular area. Some examples of these laws might include statutes, judicial verdicts, or ordinances. Example of positive law includes rules such as the speed that individuals are allowed to drive on the highway and the age that individuals can legally purchase alcohol. Ideally, when drafting positive laws, governing bodies would base them on their sense of natural law.
Affirmative law. Supplementary laws binding but not required at every moment. It is defined as a set of procedures designed to eliminate unlawful discrimination among applicants, remedy the results of such prior discrimination, and prevent such discrimination in the future. In other words, affirmative action law are policies instituted by the government to help level the playing field for those historically disadvantaged due to factors. Example, outreach campaign, targeted recruitment, employee and management development, training programs, outreach efforts, and other positive steps.
Negative law or prohibitory law of humans are obliged to conflicts. A negative law defines a failure to do something that R has a legal duty to do. It can be inaccurate that involves the breach of a legal duty. To take a positive action. Example of negative law. Those are rights are called negative rights because such as rights are claimed by one person that impose a negative and duty on all others. The duty is not to interfere with a person, the activities in the certain area.
Moral laws. Some common synonyms of moral are ethical, noble, righteous, and virtuous. While all these words means conforming a standard what is right and wrong. Moral implies conformity to establish, sanction, codes, or accept notions of right and wrong. These principles describing conduct that is right and wrong, the law of God, state, and church. A general rule of right living, especially such a rule or group of rules conceived as universal and unchanging, and as having sanction of God's will, of conscience, of man's moral nature, or natural justice to revealed as human reason. The basic protection of rights is the moral law based on man's dignity. A man's moral nature, we define it as the way a human being reacts to his instinctual demands for value choice. The word morality is neutral. It does not refer either good or evil, but primarily the nature of a response, the kind of response human beings are moral beings. Because of this built-in demand that we make choices that concerning our behavior. We do not decide to be moral anymore. Then we decide to break. The first example of moral laws is love your family. Family morals are the beliefs that family members have about right and wrong and good and bad. Treating others with kindness and respect, not taking things that don't belong to you. Operating with parents by following familiar rules. And the second rules, respect others. Being respected by important people in our lives, growing up to teaches us how to be respectful towards others. Respect means that you accept somebody for who they are, even when they're different from you or you don't agree with them. Respect in your relationships builds feelings to trust, safety, and well-being.
Penal laws. Enacted laws by the state prescribing penalty for violators means that statutes enacted and enforced by the state in its own name, and which imposes penalties for the conducts that are prohibited by the state. It is a body of rules that prevents acts that threaten, harm, or otherwise endanger the safety and welfare of the public by imposing punishment on those who breach these laws. This usage is synonymous with criminal law. So, why is it important to have penal law? So, criminal laws appear to be established to protect people, but they are actually passed to ensure peace and good order in society.
In our lesson, we are taught that morality is inseparable to one's nature. It means that we are closely connected and that we cannot be considered separately. We also learn that as followers of Christ, we need to observe His commandments, the rules and policies of our society, and most of all, to see and do what is ought to do. That is, our action shall bring happiness and peace to everyone.
Is not enough.